Welcome to the Eschatology Podcast. This is Klif with Ben Zimmerman and our guest, Amy Gilroy, editor of CE Outlook. It is Gilroy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Welcome. Amy, in my opinion, is easily the most proficient, if not the only journalist covering the car audio industry today. When I first started handling press releases from the brand level, I immediately noticed Amy was different from anyone else I was sending press releases to, and that she doesn't just copy and paste a press release every time. She digs into the corners and usually asks me questions I had to think about to answer. And then she kind of was able to mold that into a story that was worth reading for the average viewer. I think the majority of those of us in the car audio industry, those of us who do it for a living, were either enthusiasts or started out somewhere on the practical end of things, whether it be installing or sales at a store level or any of those things. And then we transitioned into our positions and careers over time. Most of us didn't have a career in the job position that we're in now and then joined the industry. We were involved in the industry first and then molded our skills into our job position. Whereas I feel like you, Amy, had a different path to lead you to being editor of CE Outlook and what all that entailed. Can you tell us a little bit some about your career path and what led you to where you are, how long you've been in journalism, and kind of what got you interested in it?
Sure. I've been a journalist for about 3 decades. And believe it or not, I was an enthusiast also. I was interested in journalism. I decided I wanted to write about business because at the time, I didn't really understand politics. I knew that it was full of...
Do any of us?
I knew it was full of spin, and I didn't understand where the truth lied. I think now I'm a little older, I can see through spin, but back then I couldn't. And so I wanted to cover business because I thought at some point there was money and there was truth in it somewhere. I decided I wanted to cover business, and I loved music. I loved audio, and I saw an ad for a secretary at a car stereo magazine in New York, a trade magazine. It was Audio Video International. So I started as a secretary there and worked my way up. I love music, and I can remember being in a car with my boyfriend, and he way back when, a long time ago, and he got like an FM modulator so that the cars came with AM radios. They didn't come with FM radios. And he had a good sound system, and it sounded amazing. And I worked when I was in high school, and I saved up money, and I got a hold, maybe it was when I was in college, I think. I got a hold of, they gave out these stereo magazines where they had all the specs for the different home receivers and amplifiers. And I studied it because I wanted to get a system. I went to the local stereo specialist at the time. Again, I brought my boyfriend, and I was asking questions, and the salesman would not look at me. He would not answer me. He kept looking at my boyfriend. I kept saying, I am buying this system. It's for me. He would not look at me. Because I guess it was so rare that
right.
An 18-year-old girl was an audio enthusiast. I got the system. It was a dual turntable, a Sony receiver, and some speakers called Bose Interaudio. There was some off-label. I couldn't believe what the music sounded like. I was listening to opera, which I hated, because even opera sound amazing. Later on, covering audio, somebody gave me a $250 cartridge. I was listening to an original master recording of Little Feat on that system with that cartridge. And I've never heard anything that sounded better than that. But there was something about listening to music in a car, going 80 miles an hour. And I fell for it. I love audio in the car just as much as anybody else, I think.
That's awesome. That's really cool. You worked for that magazine. How did your journalism career progress from there?
I was basically writing press releases there, and it's funny because one of the press releases that came in was from this little Japanese company that with the press releases were in broken English with these little pictures of funny characters, and the company was Nintendo. So it turns out they did pretty well.
Who heard of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have just thrown away the releases, but
that's funny.
Anyway, so they let me write a couple of feature stories. I remember writing about Kenwood. I remember it was like the good old days, like at Christmas time. There was a lot of money in audio and car audio, and the Kenwood, I guess, PR guy would come in with cases stacked on a dolly of wine for people in the office. I mean, I was lowly, nothing came to me. But anyway, so I moved from there to a publication called Home Furnishings Daily that had an audio and video, section. It was, it was a newsroom. It was interesting, and they really taught me journalism. They had a team of lawyers that would defend you. You just write what you have to say and what's right. And my editor would have sold his soul for a story. My immediate editor was away once. I was writing about Marantz, I learned that it was up for sale, and that I even knew what the negotiations were because I had a source. The editor came around and said, "What do you got?" I told him, and he was like, "Go for it." Somebody else corroborated it. It was just fun. I'm typing on this old-fashioned, the old-fashioned typewriters.
Right.
And I'm typing, and he's standing over me, and I'm getting the story out. I called I guess it was Joseph Tushinsky at Marantz, a week later to follow up, and he's threatening to sue me. Anyway, it was fun. Man. It was a good old day. Marantz, by the way, I think discovered Sony when they were two people in a hut with some kind of radio. But anyway.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd have to look into it. The story's decades old now. But
wow, I did not know that.
So from there, I began freelancing. Back then there were 30 trade journals alone for audio and car audio.
Right.
And I always freelanced for Auto Sound and Communications. I kept my hand in that for a long time, and then went over to Twice, where I freelanced regularly. And in order to freelance, I needed to branch out. So I learned about computers, began writing about that, and eventually they put me on staff at Twice because I wasn't living in New York. So it was a big step for them to allow somebody to write for them remotely. In about late 1999, I guess the car audio editor left, and so I started covering car audio. So it's been 18 years now covering car audio. Twice folded about 7 years ago. I was let go, and I didn't know what to do. And when you're let go, and I send out a blast, you never know who's going to respond, who your friends are, right? So, but this one, he had been a buyer at J&R Music World. We were friends. And he said, we always talked about doing a blog together. And he really encouraged me. He said, do a blog. And I said, what am I going to write about? And how am I going to make money? He just kept encouraging me. And I started writing, and a mailing list now, 6,000 people the CE Outlook goes to every day.
Is that how CE Outlook was born?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just I had a ticket for CES, even though that I had from Twice. 2 weeks later, without a job, I just went to CES and started writing.
That's really cool as a backstory for the organization. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, you know what? At the time, it was the recession, and so nobody was writing. A lot of the magazines had stopped.
Right.
And now Twice was barely writing about it because they let go of the car stereo editor. There was a vacuum. There was a space for it. So it was a little bit fortuitous.
You've been doing this for a few years, and I feel like you're a very driven person and doing the best that you possibly can with what you have in front of you at all times. I mean, it comes across quickly. But what are your goals with CE Outlook and what excites you about it? And are you happy with what it's become to today and you want to continue to iterate on that? Or do you have other hopes and dreams for it? Or what are your goals?
The business model of CE Outlook is to deliver news that the industry needs. So, I enjoy watching trends. My favorite thing was, I'm sorry for people who hate Apple, is Steve Jobs. I mean, you'd hear these rumors and you'd go on the press conference, and it was watching somebody transform how we listen to music and how we use technology. To me, those kind of stories, a trend that shows that we're going to make a shift now to something else. I love that. And I like watching out for the general trends and then applying them to seeing how they're going to affect car audio and delivering that kind of news to you guys so that you can see what's coming down the pike. So that's among my favorite things to do at CE Outlook. And, my goal, I wake up every day and I try to get the best story I can. My business is really a headline in your inbox and a story that delivers on it fairly so that you'll click on the next headline, right? As far as CE Outlook, I don't really have any big plans for the future. I've tried branching out and into a consumer site, and I was too exhausted.
Probably the feedback alone was exhausting.
So, I'd still like to do that if there's a way that I can, find somebody to help me to do it, because I think it would help the industry to get a wide, at least an audience, for the technology and teach people that it's out there, right? Yeah, for right now, I wake up every day and try to deliver a good story in CE Outlook.
And that was part of my question, because I think you're very good at it, and stick with that.
Thank you.
How would you say, as a whole, some of the biggest shifts or what you've seen, how the car audio industry has changed since you've been involved covering it? Well,
I started covering it around 1981. So, like I said, there was an FM converter hanging off the dashboard. But I also, when I moved to Home Furnishings Daily, and finally became like a beat reporter. Audio was my beat. That's when the CD, it was an amazing time, not just in car, but for all consumer electronics. The CD player was coming out, the video game industry was rising, and cellular phones were just coming out. So it was an amazing time to be a reporter in consumer electronics. When CD players first came out, at that time, the industry, when a new product came out, it was the specialists that got it first, right? So the CD player was a big deal. It was a big deal. It's like people had been writing about that. It was coming for years. Finally, it came out. Specialists have it. They sell to some of the enthusiasts. And then what? It's like the rest of the world doesn't know about it yet. I remember standing on a street corner in New York City where HFD was, the magazine, Home Furnishings Daily, and just asking people if they knew what a compact disc was. And none of them did. Obviously, compact disc then took over for the next, 15 years. And that's what car audio was about. By the way, I have to tell a story that at one of the Sony press conferences for CD players, we walked in and, the chairs are set up and there's somebody sitting already in the chairs. It was Frank Zappa.
Oh my goodness.
And we all just kind of sat around next to him, and he was just an enthusiast. He was interested. He wanted to hear the press conference. So obviously now the industry's progressed to where there's, it's more about OEM integration, and it's less a hobby, it's more of a business, and we're competing now the specialists are competing with online sales and with mass merchants. Yeah, so it's definitely a different business now.
What about the people involved in it? How have you seen, you're dealing with a lot of different people at at least deeply involved in a lot of these companies. Would you say there's been a difference in the culture over time, or is it very similar, just a different scale, or what do you think?
Well, there's been a change in the culture because I think things are more, there's less money in it. So it's more get down to business and people have to watch the bottom line more now. And people have less time because people are doing the jobs that maybe 3 people used to do. It's harder and it's unfortunate because I think there's less time for marketing to the public, which is what needs to be done, and less money for that. There's less money for R&D, which is a problem. And the car audio industry in the beginning was in the shadow of home audio. And there were pioneers who helped, take those products and stuff them into the car, right? One of those people, say like Reese Haggett at Alpine, they helped create the industry and developed a culture where the products aimed at the specialist. I guess the culture of how you'd sell to specialists, bringing them all wherever to Hawaii. And they helped create, this industry. Now, we're a mature industry now, kind of fighting for survival, and as many consumer electronics industries are right now. But there are leaders, and what the industry is fortunate to have is that there are people who just love it. They love audio, they love car audio, and so they're very talented. They could probably be engineers for, IBM or something else, but they're here, and we benefit from that, and we still have that, and it makes reporting. I love it. It makes my job a lot easier and a lot more fun.
That's a lot of great insight. You mentioned kind of bridging the gap with consumers better and advertising more at that level. And I agree. It's a difficult problem, especially when you're trying to figure out what demographics, because it seems like, the generation after mine, for example, those that are in their, teens to early 20s are far less interested in cars in general. Most of the music is delivered through earbuds or headphones from their device. It seems,
or just the device's speaker in a public place.
And we all love that.
Yeah.
I love my music so much. I want to share it everywhere I go, including while you're eating dinner.
Right.
So often.
Ben's in my generation and previous generations. I think there was the vehicle itself was a big symbol of freedom. It was one of those things where, 16, get your driver's license, you get in a car, you get to go do what you want on your own, see your friends, talk to your friends, show off, whatever. And especially for guys, but girls included, I bet my wife in car audio because she was a car audio enthusiast. So I'm not, not trying to be sexist there at all, but the majority of the time it was guys. And now it seems like that same freedom, that communication, everything else has migrated into the devices now. That's what my kids talk about. I mean, my kids know practically everything about what the new iPhone is and everything else. And I don't say any of it that they do. That's their next symbol of freedom is when do they get Instagram, or when do they, get this or that, to where they can communicate with their friends and hang out. I mean, it's almost like this virtual hangout has overtaken the cars drive-in. And I guess, one, do you see any trends from your level regarding where we go next, or do we kind of play it out? How do you think the industry can change or improve to gear with those times?
Okay, this is way above my pay grade, so, but so my answer is my answer, but it's, this is the kind of thing that the CEOs of major corporations are deciding. But okay, so first off, I'll just say that I don't have one in my car right now, but I had an amazing system in a Honda, and when my kids were growing up, if I played that system, I would put on like Tool, like hardcore, like heavy metal, because that's what they liked. if I played that system for one of their friends, I mean, they would all start, well, how do I get this? Well, how could daughters, friends, like I have memories of them just like singing at the top of their lungs, in the car, because we would be blasting music that just sounded amazing. So when any kid that I know hears that system, they want it. So there's that. There's always going to be, I think, appreciation of audio on some level if people are exposed to it. That being said, I mean, the biggest transformation that we're going to see as a society, it's arguable that will be transportation in the next 10, 15 years. And there are some that say that Uber and Lyft will have a fleet of cars and we'll summon them, just like summon an Uber or a Lyft vehicle right now. Within 2 minutes, wherever you want to go, you summon a car and you go. And then, so most people are not going to own cars. And, some say that's going to start in 2030, but, who knows? Everything's going to change. So I couldn't begin to prognosticate what impact that will have. But there was a recent article in Automotive News that was pointed out to me that car dealerships are going to go away because the people that own cars are going to be a couple of fleets. I don't know where the industry is going to go in 15, 20 years from now. But,
it's a huge thing, not just for mobile electronics, but for,
right,
like you're alluding to, the whole, infrastructure of cars and insurance companies for cars, and the whole infrastructure there is just dynamically changing quickly.
Honestly, just about every job you can think of is threatened right now. And
right.
I don't know what society's going to do when half of us don't work because there are robots taking over our job. And there are people thinking about it. So, but yeah. I will say that I do know that people love audio when they're exposed to it. I've seen it over and over again.
It's one of those things where we're kind of in a shift. We're finally kind of hitting the big shift from where us as a culture were maybe 150, 200 years ago to when everybody was in agriculture, and now was like 2 or 3% of the population handles agriculture for the rest of the nation. And then we went into the industrial era, and now we're obviously coming out of that into, again, something different, at least as a nation. Maybe not completely globally, but as a nation. I will definitely see a shift. I think the hardcore enthusiasts, the guys who are doing this now, will probably keep doing it. And there might, I don't think that'll stop. If anything, as our current vehicles become more of a minority, I think they might become more precious to people, and they actually invest more in them at that point. A small piece of the pie, it may not get a ton smaller within the next generation, but then after that, I'm sure there'll be a shift.
I do actually have a thought on that. I've written about it a little bit. There will be in these fleets cars that are designed for entertainment. You might be able to order a car with a super sound system, right? So
That'd
say
be cool.
You're going on a long journey. So maybe you could order a car with $100,000 sound system in it. These are going to be operated as fleets. So if I were a car audio retailer, I would, and for other reasons as well, want to start getting into fleets, fleet sales, one way or another, either, approaching the local municipal organizations with fleets and local businesses with fleets. It also builds up your reputation as being a quality installer. It seems to me that that's going to be part of the path in the future.
That would be neat if the company, a speaker company or whoever, electronics company, would offer 20% off product for all Uber drivers or something to get their product into those vehicles for people to have as they drive around.
Right. Like you can order different vehicles right now with Uber. So
yeah.
How about the one with the super
package.
Sound system?
No, it's stuff that you don't think about every day because at least I don't, because kind of stuck what's today and what's tomorrow. But yeah, it's good stuff to think about long term for everybody.
And Klif, going back to what you had said to intro this piece, when you and I were 16, 17, whatever, getting our first cars, getting, to drive around with our friends. I know I certainly didn't have a high resolution audio system in my car, but we sure as hell enjoyed driving around, jamming out to music on our tape decks. So if there's some piece of it there that's, yes, the having an awesome system enhances that, but getting into the emotion of the music, regardless of the system, I think has a lot to do with it. And, people need to kind of find that. And, my own system, I'll sit in it and analyze it to death and listen to certain pieces so I know what I'm listening for. But then sometimes I'll just hit, play me this XYZ playlist, and I just enjoy the music. So you have to learn how to do that too.
All right, before we get to Terminator 2 on this, I'm not sure where we're going. Going back to CE Outlook a little bit and, your journalism side, you recently announced that you're presenting press releases visibly separate from feature stories.
Right.
Can you give us some insight on that? Just from your standpoint? Because, obviously it was necessary to bring forward, and I don't expect you to go into great detail why or where or how, but I think it definitely is separating you further from not just people in car audio news, but I think a lot of electronics news, because a lot of things are presented as fact, regardless of whether they're fact or not. And you're obviously wanting to put kind of a personal stamp of approval on the stories that you're presenting. So at least that's my take from it, from the outside looking in, based on what you've written. So what's your side of that?
Well, honestly, I thought it was always obvious that that the difference between a feature story that was written from a kind of journalistic standpoint, where you were examining the facts, and a press release where somebody was saying, company XYZ, the best company since sliced bread, has announced that we are now. I thought it was obvious and I found that it wasn't, that there were companies making claims and people thought that CE Outlook was making those claims. And I realized I would file things under press releases or under features, but once somebody opened the story, it was not readily obvious. So I had to make some kind of change. So it was kind of a housekeeping, but my policies haven't, changed. I work on stories that I fact check and examine from journalistic fashion / journalist / blogger fashion. And then there are stories that I just reprint, that I put up as a public service from the various companies.
Well, and I think some of that might be just because you do, historically, it feels like you even put work into press releases.
Yeah, I did.
And you kind of put your imprint on that in doing so. So maybe some people kind of assume that everything that comes across has been thoroughly investigated by CE Outlook, and obviously that could never be the case because nobody has enough hours in the day.
Right. Yeah, that's what happened. I used to kind of summarize press releases, like for the reader. This is geared towards you guys, or towards dealers who don't have much time. So I used to summarize them, but as we're in this longer, more companies find us, and I was getting more and more press releases, and that was taking too much of my time. I couldn't get to the feature story. So I just began reprinting the press releases.
Sure. What would you say most viewers are looking for? We're talking to enthusiasts about enthusiasts, I guess. But what stories, what even press releases grab you more or are more exciting, or you see get picked up more by readers?
Well, I learn that every day when I put out a story, and it's kind of, you guys vote with your clicks. I was surprised because I was writing about driver safety a couple of years ago, and it wouldn't get a lot of clicks, right? Maybe it's getting more now, vehicle-to-vehicle communication. an area that could be big for the aftermarket. Unfortunately, right now, under the current administration, they're averse to regulation, and that kind of technology would have to get some kind of mandate from the government in order for everybody to start including it in their vehicles. It doesn't look like there have been reports that that this administration is not interested in doing that, and that vehicle-to-vehicle communications has been taken off their agenda right now. So, anyway, I forgot the question already. I just started going off on a tangent.
No. What I mean, just do people gravitate more toward like people stories? They gravitate more toward new products. I feel like a lot of the new product stuff, at least from my perspective, kind of gets meh. Yeah, okay, great. There's not a lot of groundbreaking things under the sun right now. But long story short, do you have any personal inclination on what makes for an interesting story?
Yes, but I don't know if I can put that into words. That's my secret sauce, right? To know that.
Sure. But, and that's fine.
I will say certain things, and it's surprising. So I wrote a story about an 18-year-old got into the business and kills it. Like his business just took off. I mean, that story got, thousands and thousands of hits. I was surprised. So there is that, because that appealed to the human factor, right? Here I am struggling day in and day out with, as a car audio dealer. And so an 18-year-old kid comes in and is a millionaire, so you're going to click on that story, right? Clarion leaving the business, that was a big story because, people did have an emotional attachment to that. It's more than a new product because a lot of these guys are skeptical about carrying new products, but some new products they're very interested in. Some they just don't seem to care about. People, yeah, they do care about people. A lot of the people stories, if it's somebody everybody knows, they do care about. It's not something I can put into words. It's like a gut instinct. It's
Well, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with timing and such too. I mean, if a story comes through at a time that everybody's thinking about it or everybody wants to know something at the same time, I'm sure those stories get picked up much quicker than if the same story came out at the wrong time.
Yeah, exactly. And we try to be first here, or I try to be first.
Sure. Would you have any advice to someone, because I'm sure somebody at some point listening to this or interested in what you have to say is also somewhat interested in journalism or covering the car audio industry or some other industry. Is there any advice that you would give to a young you starting out? Would you have started CE Outlook sooner? Or do you think that having the journey that you had was necessary for you? But, is that something that you wish you had jumped ship sooner? You wish you had learned more about something else first? You wish, is there any advice that you would give yourself 20 years ago?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did everything wrong. Like I was in school. I decided I wanted to study journalism, and they didn't have a journalism department. And so I didn't. And I studied literature. When I got out, I went straight to a trade magazine. So my advice would be A, major in journalism or take journalism courses. And B, I think, I didn't make the sacrifice of working on a local paper, which you do for no money, right? And I think that's important training. So I would say, for a journalist starting out is to, work for a local paper. That's where you get your real training. But it's hard. I mean, the industry's lost, I think, more than half its journalists since 2007. It's a tough industry. I don't know that I would tell somebody to get into it.
Well, and I think it's kind of like car audio, right? I mean, why are any of us doing this when it's obviously a declining field that gets harder and harder with more people entering into it. And, why are we here? I think it's something you either you do because you love it or you don't. Whether it's the smartest thing to do or not doesn't seem to come into play a lot. But but no, I mean, so your advice is essentially get the proper schooling and then get the hard knocks through working.
Right. Yeah, at a local paper. That kind of teaches you the basic of journalism.
And are you saying that primarily because it's more agnostic when it comes to what it's covering, and more just these are the things you do regardless of the story, regardless of who you're talking to, regardless of what you're covering? I mean, or what's the reasoning behind working for the local paper?
I think more just that it helps you understand news and news gathering, that there's something happening immediately. There's the town hall, right? And so it just trains you. What do my readers need to know about what's happening in their community? It's good training. And yeah.
I'm out of questions, Ben. Do you have anything?
Something I was thinking of initially and just didn't pipe in. We discussed CE Outlook a little bit. For those who aren't familiar with CE Outlook, how do you find CE Outlook? And is it geared more towards industry professionals, or is it also for general consumers to kind of look through the latest trends and news?
Well, it's geared towards industry professionals, but if you're an enthusiast, I think you'll find stories that you can relate to and that are going to be interesting to you.
Yeah, I see links to articles posted frequently in some of the groups that I'm in on Facebook and in online forums. But a lot of the times I'm just looking at the headline and I don't pay attention to, okay, what is, the news organization behind this? So.
Right.
Yeah. Is there a way to subscribe or?
Yeah, sure. If you Google CE Outlook, it'll come up and there's a place where you can subscribe to it. I mean, I can give out my email address. Anybody can email me and I'll put you on the mailing list. But I think there is a place on the website where you can subscribe. Between the newsletter and the website, it gets 1.4 million views a year, which
wow, cool.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. It's certainly more than I anticipated.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This was fun.
I know this is probably way out of the norm for your day, but
definitely.
But I appreciate it, and we'll wrap it up there and let you get back to your busy day, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.